Thank you for coming for my little talk today, and thank you very much for inviting me to the Center of Korean Studies. Over the past few years, I have been working on Japan's invasion of Korea in 1592 to 1598, which is known as the Imjin War or Imjin Weran in Korea. In Japan, it is commonly called Bunnoku Keiichi no Eki. This two-volume monograph project has been a great fun for me. Today, I'd like to take a sidetrack from the war to discuss a sort of art history, border-crossing art history that had to do with Korean ceramics used in the culture of tea drinking in Japan for about 2 centuries in pre-modern times, from the mid-16th to early 18th centuries. In pre-modern Japan, drinking a cup of tea was evolved into a form of cultural life known as chanoyu that accompanied the employment of famous works of art and craft, or meibutsu in Japanese, 명물 in Korean. Chanoyu was an act with political and cultural implications. For example, in 1577, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the man who would send an invading force to Korea 15 years later, took over Kozuki Castle in Harima. This is Harima in central Japan, and Kozuki, the castle, where is it? Here, this one, Kozuki Castle. He decisively delivered a blow to the Mori in Western Japan, who was the arch-rival of Hideyoshi's overlord, Oda Nobunaga. Delighted and out of thanks, Oda Nobunaga rewarded Hideyoshi with, guess what? A small utensil used in chanoyu. That's it. And that was this way, this one. He and his troops risked their lives for this little kettle in 1577. That's it. But Hideyoshi was overwhelmed. This the small utensil was an iron kettle known as otogoze negama, deeply honored. Hideyoshi soon used this kettle in the chanoyu that he hosted after the battle, and as such, he had treasured it until he died. In Japan, from the mid-16th to early 18th centuries, chanoyu constituted a serious politics exercised by the most powerful of the country. The tea utensils used in chanoyu, which the nation's most powerful and wealthiest individuals vied to possess, were the towering symbols of power, authority, wealth, prestige, and so on. This is a fascinating topic which late Professor Herbert Plutchow explored for many years. Political authority was coupled with and projected into ritual order. And interestingly, tea ceremony was one of the most highly regarded arenas of ritual order, one that gave birth to the aesthetic classification of tea utensils, aesthetics, was inseparable from politics. When chanoyu loomed large in politics during this period, a particular item notably dominated the fashion of the time. It was what was imported from Korea, tea bowls, commonly called Korai chawan, Korean tea bowls, Goryo dawan in Korean. Korean tea bowls fashioned a style of chanoyu known as Wabi-cha or simply Wabicha. Korean tea bowls held the key to the aesthetic of Wabicha that began to arise in the early to mid-16th century in Japan. So in this connection, I would like to discuss some aspects of Korean tea bowls, which ended the previous era of Shoin no cha. I will show that what that means, and ushered in the new age of Wabicha that would last into the early or mid-18th century. Currently, it is known that about 660 Korean tea bowls, which originated from this period, have survived in Japan. Many of these tea bowls have their own individual names, or mei in Japanese, and their own individual histories that have spanned over 4 to 5 centuries. Some of them are designated by the Japanese government as national treasures or important cultural assets. Like this one, this particular tea bowl on the left-hand side is a national treasure. Right-hand side is an important cultural asset. They are priceless. No matter how wealthy one is, the person cannot buy. In contrast, not a single Korean tea bowl has survived in Korea. It is an irony. Some people have very much tried to find the Korean tea bowls in Korea, sometimes by digging illegally here and there, but all in vain. To be sure, tea bowls were just one of many items used in Wabicha that include, as you see here, this is a kettle, and this is a tea caddy, tea container, which has been very valuable. And then this one is a container for used water, and then water for boiling the tea, and then other ladle, and so on. But the Korean tea bowls were a key symbol that defined the aesthetics of Wabicha. Korean tea bowls were produced mostly in the southern parts of Korea between the late 15th and early 18th centuries, and imported to Japan. Before the importation of Korean tea bowls, chanoyu in Japan was represented by the style of shoinu-cha that featured like this one, karamono or Chinese items. Many tea utensils imported from China in the medieval period. And this one is also Japan's national treasure. So karamono or Chinese items were considered the objects of richness and perfection in the shoinu-cha. The setting of shoinu-cha is like this one. This is the culmination of the style of chanoyu. The people would gather inside this building and have a tea ceremony using Chinese items, like the one which I showed moments ago. It was Murata Shuko this man, a Zen monk and a tea master, who gave a new form to shoin no cha by replacing some karamono items with Japanese items, or wamono. This trend was inherited by Takenojo, this person, a Sakai merchant and tea master. Many people in Sakai, the port city, not far from the current Osaka. And he linked the term wabi to chanoyo. Takenojo's sense of wabi was further fostered by Senno the Rikyu, a Sakai merchant and a tea master who perfected the chanoyo he had inherited from Takenojo in the form of tea in a thatched hut or a chawan, like this one. This is a tea house, and you can see fundamental differences from the golden pavilion which I showed, where shoin no cha was held. The chawan no cha is better known as Wabicha, or a tea of wretchedness or even sadness. But gradually, the term wabi is derived from wabu, which means to be wretched, or wabi-shi, which means wretched, and originally referred to the miserable feeling that came from material deprivation. In practicing Wabicha, Rikyu first paid attention to Japanese raku tea bowls, like this one, a black raku tea bowl, this one. But gradually, he switched to Korean tea bowls. Over time, not only Korean tea bowls, but other tea utensils were also imported from Korea and employed in Wabicha. It is known that the Rikyu initially tried to harmonize and mix Chinese and Japanese items in his quest for beauty, not possessed by either. He eventually found this beauty of the middle not in either one of them, but in Korean things. The Korai mono, which he thought had a warmth unknown to the works of China and a delicacy of texture and craftsmanship not found in Japan. So as far as Rikyu was concerned, Korean items perfectly represented the ideal of wabi. In 1591, Rikyu, who had been a tea master for Hideyoshi, was ordered by his master Hideyoshi to seppuku, to cut the belly. Interestingly, along with his craving for golden tea room, Hideyoshi was also indulged in Wabicha and helped it rise to the status of a national sacrament by the late 16th century. So how popular were Korean tea bowls in the world of Wabicha? This one shows the data gleaned from the chronicles of tea ceremonies called chakaiki during this period. As you see here, in this period, Chinese items almost more than 90%, but over time, the Korean items were increasing along with the Japanese items, ups and downs, about half and half. By the mid or early 17th century, Chinese items all died out, not favored any longer in the world of Wabicha in Japan. The Korea tea bowls used in the Japanese Wabicha were different from Korea's mainstream products, such as celadon in the Goryeo period and white porcelain in the Joseon period. These high-quality wares were produced in public kilns for the court, government offices, and the high end of Yangban ruling class. On top of that, the Korean tea bowls, the favored in Japanese Wabicha, were not originally intended for usage as a teacup at all. They were simply cheap and crude bowls produced in private kilns for mass consumption, and commoners used them as containers of rice, salted vegetables, I guess this is kimchi, and the soup, the wine, makgeolli, and the like. Nevertheless, Rikyu and other Japanese tea masters found in the simple, coarse, and unpolished bowls imported from Korea an inspiration for the ultimate beauty of Wabicha. How were these ordinary ceramics end up being favored in the world of Wabicha? In Japan, during this the period of Joseon Korea, Korean people did not much enjoy the custom of drinking tea. Back in the Goryeo period, however, tea drinking was actually very popular, as we see in a term like dabansa, which literally means the matter of drinking tea and eating. That refers to the things that happen all too often or all the time. This term was coined in the Goryeo period. Tea was also offered to ancestral spirits, as the term referring to ancestral worship spirits rituals indicated. Ancestral worship rituals were called this one, dare. And the later it's called chare, and the ritual of tea. So in Korea, people practice chare, meaning offering something to the ancestors of the family in the new year or Chuseok and some special occasions. The court had a department called dabang, which was in charge of tea-related rituals, ceremonies and events. But in today's Korea, dabang signifies a Starbucks coffee shop. So what a change. In Goryeo, Korea, tea was cultivated in southern parts of Gyeongsang and Jeolla provinces, and in Jeju Island. Cultivating tea was not an easy job, and peasants who were assigned to send tea products to the government suffered a lot, as a saying of the time indicated. That was, the tea is the blood of the people of southern provinces. The newly established Joseon government, which tried to lessen the pain of tea taxation, began to discourage tea drinking customs. Over time, tea culture gradually declined in Korea, as tea was replaced by liquor. After the Imjin War, Korea came to fully embrace the culture of liquor, relegating tea drinking customs to some Buddhist monks and a tiny minority of Confucian scholars only. The chasabar, which meant tea bowls of the Goryeo period, were eventually transformed into sulsabar, meaning liquor bowls. Indeed, Joseon Korea had a culture of liquor, very contrasting to Tokugawa Japan. On the other hand, there occurred some concurrent changes in the production of ceramics. When the Mongols invaded the Goryeo kingdom in the 1230s to 1250s, most of the potters who had produced what is known as, like this one, the Goryeo 청자, around the capital Gangjin, Buan, there are some eminent places in Korea, were dislocated and scattered into the interior. These potters could not find high-quality material in their new locations, nor a high demand of a celadon. Instead, they began to produce a coarse, simple style of a celadon, a sort of a quasi-celadon, known as this one, buncheong sagi, blue powdered celadon, which are grayish, pale blue or dim green, for commoners, not for the court. At the same time, the court and high-class families favored white porcelain, like this one, chosen white porcelain, which were produced in the public kilns of Gwangju in Gyeonggi province. Saongwon, a government office, controlled these public kilns and potters, who numbered more than 1,000. So white porcelain was a fashion of the time, and the commoners also followed suit as they dragged into a simple, cheap white porcelain products. Amid this trend, the pale remnants of Goryeo celadon, namely buncheong sagi, were gradually forgotten. But interestingly, Japanese tea masters who opened the new era of Wabicha spotted that these coarse products of buncheong sagi and low-quality white porcelain, what was relegated into the backstage of ceramic production in Korea, resurrected to the fore in Japan. Korean tea bowls, which captured the aesthetic sense of Wabicha masters in the 16th century and on, were various. How to classify them? This is a big headache. Japanese tea masters have classified them into 20 or even 50 or some categories based on their patterns, these shapes, designs, glaze types, clay materials, origins of production, like this one. And it's somewhat arbitrary. As you see here, based on shapes and glaze, Korai, Katate, Mori, and so on, and then patterns, Mishima, Hakeme, Kyogen, Hakama, Ungaku, and this one, the place names. Kinkai, it's a city near Busan called Kimhae, and then Gomogai or Gomogae, it's in southern Gyeongsang province. It was a port city in Premodern times, connecting Korea to Japan. And it's Ungcheon, but they are called Gomogai in Japan. But these classifications also an indicator of the rich repertoire of Korean ceramics. So roughly speaking, the importation of the Korean tea bowls to Japan underwent 3 different stages. In the first stage, from the late 15th to mid-16th centuries, Korean potters produced ordinary ceramic bowls for domestic markets. But some of their products ended up being used in Chanoyu in Japan. The pirates, merchants from Rikyu and northern Kyushu, and in particular, Tsushima, the people who saw an opportunity of profit-making in the increasing popularity of Korean bowls in Japan, began to smuggle these products into Japan. Nevertheless, there is no evidence that Korean potters were aware of this, and that accordingly they did not make ceramic products as Chanoyu utensils. It means that these products were sold cheap and that traders made handsome profits. It was a big business for them. The Korean government at the time maintained a strict maritime prohibition policy. Those who violated the ban on international transactions of Korean products were subjected to heavy punishment. So it means that the first phase of Korean tea bowls used in Chanoyu were, in theory, all contraband. Among the Korean tea bowls adopted in Wabicha, the most prized ones were those produced during this period. These highly cherished tea bowls included Mishima, Ido, Kyogen Hakama, and so on. In particular, Ido or tea bowls, like this one, there are several different subcategories of these Ido tea bowls. This type of Ido tea bowls were also very much favored by Hideyoshi. And they were considered a wealthy poverty and impoverished wealth because they were poor in appearance but very rich in price. Like Ido tea bowls like this one were transacted in the 16th century with how much? 10,000 to 50,000 goku of rice. The goku is a unit of rice. An adult can survive with 1 goku. So if you have a teacup like this one, you can feed 50,000 people for 1 year. So very high, very high. And actually they are transacted in this way. And then Korai is cracked and open into a space here, and then Hakeme over there. There is all detailed research on each of these tea bowls. Many of them are so famous, their own genealogy, who owned when it was used, they traded with how much, and so on. And many of them are in the museums of Tokugawa Japan, Nezu Japan, and so on. So all famous items during this the period. In the second stage, from the mid-16th century to 1598, Korean potters learned to some extent that their products were valued in Japan, even though they didn't have any direct access to transactions in Japanese markets. For their part, traders and merchants, mostly from Tsushima, began demanding Korean potters to make tea bowls and other ceramic items more attractive and sellable to tea masters in Japan. During the wartime of 1592 to 1598, the Japanese troops occupied the southern Gyeongsang area, and in particular during the years of 1594 to 1596, when the war was in stalemate, many Japanese generals stationed in Korea built tea houses and spent their idle time with tea ceremonies, employing Korean tea bowls. There are many interesting documents telling their story of Chanoyu during the wartime. These Japanese daimyo tried to project their taste into tea bowls when they placed an order to Korean potters. A couple of tea bowls which Mori Terumoto acquired in Korea during this period is preserved in the Mori Museum in Jofu in Yamaguchi Prefecture. I visited once at the museum. And the Korean tea bowls that represented this period include this one, Gohiki and Totoya, Honte tea bowls. After 1609, which means that from 1599 to 1608, there were no interactions between the two countries right after the war. So after Japan's invasion, the Korea-Japan relations of diplomacy and trade were restored in 1609 through the leveraging efforts of Tsushima, the domain which had previously guided the invasion. The Korean government recognized Tsushima's right to trade Korean tea balls as far as they were produced within Tsushima's trading factory known as Japan House, where? In Busan. This is Tsushima and the northern Kyushu, and around this area, it was the base of invasion in 1592. So the troops would advance through this island, Tsushima, to Busan. Busan is this area. And then in 1609, the two governments agreed to set up Japan House, a trading factory in Busan. And then Korean government allowed the Tsushima merchants to trade the Korean items. And the first Japan House was built in Tumopo, or in Busan, in the 1609. And later, it moved to Choryang. The sawmill is not indicated here. It's not hard to trace the exact site of kilns built on this compound. But later, this is a better known painting showing Japan House in Choryang in the late 17th century. But the Korean government banned Japanese traders from purchasing tea utensils directly from Korean potters. So the Tsushima merchants built kilns on the compound of Japan House, hired Korean potters, procured all needed materials, and produced tea bowls and delivered them to Japanese customs. So it was a big business. And of course, some smuggling was also unavoidable from this time on. The products made in these Tsushima kilns include like this one, and they were collectively called Gohon, honorific original, or Goshomaru. Goshomaru referring to public trade ships recognized by the both the governments of Japan and Korea. And then this one, this is a typical type of tea bowls produced in Busan and imported to Japan. And then this one called Daidokuji Goki. The Goki, it's referring to utensils used at the time of rituals. Put some food and offer it to ancestors. But why Daidokuji? It's owned by Daidokuji, a Zen temple in Kyoto. And it's said that Korean envoys who visited Japan during this time brought this type of tea bowls and gave some of them to Daidokuji, where they stayed. At the time, there were no, during the Tokugawa period, there were 12 official Korean missions sent from Korea to first Kyoto and then Edo, final one up to the Tsushima. And then it's a big group of sometimes more than 500 people. And then they travel from Tsushima all the way to Osaka and Edo. They were guided by the Tsushima samurai and officials, altogether more than 1,000 people. And they had to be accommodated. There were no hotels. So they were staying at temples. Many of them were Honganji temples, which were very spacious. And at this time, they happened to stay at Daidokuji in Kyoto. So for the Tsushima domain, which produced Wabicha, procured Wabicha utensils, the imported tea bowls from Korea. The Korean tea bowls proved to be a useful political tool that kept it closely connected to the highest power of the country, the shogun and shogunal officials. Tsushima frequently presented fresh Korean tea bowls to the shogun. And then the shogunal government thanked the Tsushima when they received fresh tea bowls here. And then this is what is known as Soke documents preserved now in the Kyushu National Museum. There are more than a dozen documents remaining there. And then here, this is a letter sent by shogun's advisors to Tsushima. This is So, Tsushima no Kami, So, the daimyo of Tsushima. And then this one is here, just shitagatte Josen chawan no, Josen no Shinwatashi no chawan, Josen Shinwatashi no, the new tea bowls from Korea. Niju, kore o kenji itashi de soro. So 20 tea bowls were presented to the shogun. And shogunal top officials sent a letter of thanks to the daimyo of Tsushima. And here, the Abe and the Sakai and Doi, all top officials at the Bakufu. In Tokugawa Japan, it is well known that many eminent daimyo or tea masters, including Kobori Enshu, Kanamori Sowa, and Katagiri Sekishu, treasured the Korean tea bowls. Indeed, during the period of daimyo tea masters, admiration for the wabi values of Rikyu's tea remained as strong as ever, all the way to the early 18th century. But not long after, the demand of Korean tea bowls in Japan gradually dissipated. And by 1743, the kilns in Choryang, Japan House in Busan were all closed. After that, a small amount of Korean tea bowls were occasionally imported to Japan to the late 18th century. So on the other hand, from the early 17th century, Korean tea bowls were also produced in Japan by Korean potters who, during the war, had been taken to Japan. As Hideyoshi's invasion of Korea is often dubbed the War of Ceramics, Yakimono Senso, Japanese invaders competed to kidnap many skilled potters from Korea. These Korean potters were settled in Kyushu and Western Japan, here and there, as you see in this map. This is a Hagi, and this one is Agano, Takatori, and Karatsu, Arita, and then this one is the Satsuma. There are several Korean potters villages set up in Western Japan, and they were encouraged to produce tea bowls, so that they produced a sort of quasi-Korean tea bowls. These quasi-Korean tea bowls were often hardly distinguishable from the authentic Korean tea bowls imported from Korea. For some people, these products in Japan might look better. as you see, this is a tea ball produced in Karatsu and Kawakujiri chawan. And then it's individual names. And then this one is in Satsuma. And then, as you see, this here, this is not produced in the 17th century, but a few years ago by this man, Shinsuga, 15th generation of the Shim family who had been taken to Japan to Satsuma during the wartime. And they were potters. And they produced generation after generation tea bowls like this one and other ceramics in Satsuma. And they all look good. And then it's harder to distinguish. It requires a lot of training and experience, obviously. And then this is a also famous Korean pottery village called Okochi in Karachi. The whole village is the Korean pottery village, where they produced highly qualified, high-quality ceramics and were used by the Saga domain, and then also exported to other countries during the Edo period. There are many eminent Korean pottery villages in Kyushu, and I have been enjoying visiting these places from southern Kyushu to northern Kyushu in western Japan, Yamaguchi. And then, so here, this one is original, called Gohon, so honorific original, Tachichuru. Tachichuru meaning standing cranes. You can see a crane here. And then this is an imitation, and this is one category, and there are many Tachichuru tea bowls that look like this one and produced in Hagi. This is produced in Hagi, but not exactly the same, but there are some tea bowls very similar to the original. But the Japanese tea masters and merchants were sensitive to the original tea bowls and considered these products produced in Japan less authentic and therefore secondary. Anyhow, after having enjoyed a great deal of admiration for about 2 centuries in Japan, Korean tea bowls slowly lost their status by the early 18th century as a new taste in Chanoyu set in. It was the emergence of Japanese taste, or wafu, that would lead the culture of Chanoyu in a new direction of aesthetic domestication to the present. So as a way of concluding, I'd like to make a few points. Despite their prominence in the world of Wabicha for about 2 centuries, Korean tea bowls have not often studied, despite a great deal of attention paid to the aesthetics of Wabicha. Japanese scholars and Western scholars of Japanese tea remain by and large mute about Korean tea bowls, or mention them in passing. In contrast, karamono, or Chinese items, Chinese tea utensils, have been highlighted in comparison with wamono, or Japanese tea utensils. For Japan, China always remained the other. Korea, in contrast, was easily passed over. That's a trend we see in the international relations in pre-modern East Asia. The situation today is quite different, though. The issue of Korean tea bowls offers a window for us to explore the trajectory of evolving Chanoyu aesthetics from medieval to early modern times in Japan. Korean tea bowls symbolized the beauty of Wabicha on their own, yet in the long run, they also served as a catalyst that later gave birth to Japan-centered aesthetics. This process calls our attention to the working of a triangular relationship between China, Korea, and Japan, not only in Japanese Chanoyu, but also in other areas of border-crossing cultural contexts in the East Asian region. Trans-border issues pertaining to pre-modern East Asia go beyond the realms of diplomacy, trade, and war. The flows of people, ideas, goods, and institutions across the borders and frontiers were entangled with the issues of ethnocentrism, collective memories, conflict, opportunism, and acculturation. Given that Korean peoples were inseparable from seafaring, trade, piracy, warfare, diplomacy, and state control, we can weave another theory of pre-modern East Asian international relations through the Japanese Chanoyu, for example. On the other hand, the issue of Korean peoples can further be expanded to the study of diaspora in pre-modern East Asia. In particular, the Korean diaspora, which was the result of Japan's invasion of Korea in the late 16th century and affected tens of thousands of Koreans, remains a fascinating topic that involves war hostages, slave trade, racism, alien settlement, cultural transmission, and repatriation. This is a topic which I gave a talk when I visited last time to Ann Arbor. The Korean captives were a point of cultural contact and border-crossing survival. Now, finally, in a larger context, the issue of Korean peoples calls into question what scholars have commonly dubbed the Sino-centric world order in pre-modern East Asia. We cannot see an element of this geopolitical order in the acculturation of Chanoyu. In the world of Sino-centric order, or to a lesser extent, in the Japan-centered world order, Korea is easily dismissed, and its agency or subjectivity is often buried. This type of geopolitical configuration is so deeply rooted that the theoretical paradigm of a Sino-centric world order in pre-modern East Asia is still almost intact. It's time to dump it. Actually, in order to dump it, I have had a couple of good workshops and one conference at UBC over the past few years. So I hope that the study of Korean peoples contributes to redeeming us from potential intellectual oversight. Thank you.